again, it comes back to what does that person value?
Mhm.
What do they want to see out of their life, their socialization, their communication, their eating and eating with people, or like, do those things matter to you? Or even I'm really involved right now in AI or artificial intelligence voice cloning because this has been a
Mhm.
pretty big topic lately. And
Ah,
I have, again, it's such an exciting thing that we can have people's voices literally cloned and used in devices. So it's like so exciting that I can give them some hope back from their vocal identity. However, there are people that still say, I don't care. I don't want that. Like, I don't even care. So, good. Okay, great. And again, I have to find out where that person is and meet them where they are and then go on that journey with them. Not my journey, their journey, right?
Hi, I'm Cian Xiao.
and I'm Sammy Winemaker. We talk about ways to put the human back at the center of care.
The Waiting Room Revolution starts right now. In this episode, we're talking to Shameem Kizar, a dietitian, and Kerry Adams, a speech language pathologist who work in an ALS and motor neuron disease clinic in Edmonton, Alberta. So let's get right to the episode. Shameem and Kerry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Indeed. Hello.
Hello.
We're so excited to have you both on. I think this is the first time we've had a dietitian and a speech language pathologist on the show. So maybe we can start with you guys just telling us about your roles and how you guys work together.
Okay.
Alrighty then. Who's starting? Well, I'll start with this is how we introduce ourselves usually to patients with ALS. We have worked together for 19 years in this multidisciplinary
Oh,
clinic, yes, and we call each other work wives. We really know each other. We share an office together here. We sometimes carpool. It's been 19 years.
Yep.
And how I usually start my side of the story is I tell people that, I'm the speech pathologist here in the clinic. And so my role is to work, of course, with speech, voice, communication, anything in that regard. And then I say, but also swallow because we use these muscles, these bulbar muscles, both to talk and to eat. And then we move right into Shameem's little
And then I
segue.
usually add my little, and since swallowing impacts nutrition, that's why we come in together. And so then we ask patients, like, knowing we cover speech, swallow, nutrition, what are your main concerns for the day? And what would you like addressed at this visit?
I'm sure they're so relieved when you two arrive.
We like to think so.
Yes.
Because people with ALS run into so many issues in your shared department.
hmm
Hmm.
Yes. And we tend to be, we're the bright, encouraging ones that add a little bit of humor. We understand that communication and swallowing or eating, these are very, very social things that we do in everyday life, and they're extremely important. So when a person has changes to these areas, it's devastating. And so we are happy to walk alongside and give them our experience and our creative ideas when we can.
And we
So
always
that's
try to
actually how
ask,
we
oh,
met
yeah, go.
because you both were presenting at the ALS MND Motor Neuron Disease International Alliance last year, and you both went on stage and talked about some of the innovations that you're doing in your clinic, which is in Calgary, if I'm not mistaken.
Edmonton.
Edmonton, Alberta. And you were sharing some of the things that you do with your clients. So maybe you can share a little bit about, what are the things that the information and strategies you share to improve the lives of patients with ALS?
Well, that particular presentation, we had come up with a dysphagia workshop. And the reason we came up with it was we found, like, we would give people our instructions and, they would go home. And then when they come back with follow-up, we were like, how come they're not following what we told them to do? And then so we decided to, okay, let's do our own research. And so we met in Kerry's kitchen one year, a long time ago, and just started playing with food and started like modifying food. So we were blending, we're pureeing, we're mincing, and we realized, wow, this is a lot harder than what we think it is, because we usually just read out a little handout and give it to the patient and we're like, see you next time. So that sort of sparked us to kind of like, okay, like if this is hard for us and we know, then it's going to be really difficult for patients because they're dealing not only with this one issue, right? There's multiple things that they're dealing with. So then we decided to come up with well, like we like to consider it's a fun idea. And so we get people to do like hands-on practical, like play with the blender. Let's like, modify some food so that they can get an idea of what it's like. And then we're alongside them to help them like with some tips and tricks of like, this is how you can modify food in a better manner. This is how you can make it a bit more tasty, because there is this negative connotation to diet modification, right? Like no one wants to do it. And we don't enjoy having that discussion with patients either. But we do know that it still can help people to continue that social aspect of eating in just a different manner, right? And so that sort of brought that idea of this dysphagia workshop. So we bring patients in and their family, we do a little education session, and then we actually get them to prepare a meal for us, and we do the judging to make sure it's an appropriate consistency. And we hope people have fun with it. We've had pretty good feedback.
I remember the two of you had, this great vibe between you when you were presenting. I think the four of us said, oh, we have that in common, right?
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, like, where does humor fit into what you do with not just presenting, but, when you're doing some public or patient facing education, patient and family?
I think I I know for me, I wouldn't consider myself humorous in a way. Maybe I'm silly, but Shameem always cracks the great jokes and the one-liners. So I think first of all, it has to come naturally, right? Like, so I think for both of us, we can kind of work off each other, like we also noticed you two do.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's two things. One is that it's important. Hmm. Life can still be good. There can be good things that happen in life, even when we're going through challenges, any of us, including a terrible illness. Um, and I think that is our perspective, is that we always want to make sure that we're looking for some positives. And some of our humor might be, teasing each other or just lightening the mood a little bit. And that seems to really, break the ice.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll say something, and then this didn't this just happened by accident. I said one day, um, so speech language pathologist is SLP.
Mhm.
And one day I said, hi, I'm a speech language pathologist, la la la. And the person was really stiff and scared. And I said, that's like SLP. It's like short little person because I'm quite small. And
That's
they
funny.
laughed, and so sometimes we just have these little things that come up that just break the ice. But on the other side, that number two I wanted to say is that I think we also have to be careful, that we're not being too jovial or, like boisterous, or even in the hallway with our colleagues waiting to see the next patient and there's tons of laughing going on, and someone
Yeah.
in that room is like, you kidding me right now? Like
Mhm.
I'm stressed.
Scared. Yeah.
So it's a real fine balance to
Mhm.
just, understand where they must be coming from,
Mhm.
yet encourage a little bit of lightness.
Levity, yeah.
Yeah.
I think
That
for
makes
us
a lot.
too, it also helps us build rapport with patients, right? Because we do see patients like soon after diagnosis, and sometimes they don't have any bulbar symptoms, right? But we still meet with these patients, even if it's just limb onset. But we have this opportunity to build rapport, and so those visits might be a little bit lighter because there aren't any pressing concerns nutritionally or speech and swallow wise. So we have some opportunity to get to know patients, and so sometimes just even asking questions about like, what's their family like, what are their hobbies like,
Mhm.
it's an opportunity to kind of just get to know patients a bit better. And so then they're a bit more comfortable with us. So then if it ever gets to a point where they do need those interventions, they're much more comfortable. At least we feel they're much more comfortable with us, and they do seem to accept some of our discussions that might happen a little bit earlier than they want them to happen.
On that note, when we say if these things happen, when we know they will happen, and you say you are on the scene sometimes very early on in the illness journey. We know these patients will end up with speech and communication challenges, like you said at the beginning. So, is part of your work, do you look at it as proactive in terms of not just meeting them and putting a face to a name and a role, but how do you introduce the fact that these things will happen and you should have questions and you will need support versus coming in after there's already struggles? How do you balance that?
I think one thing that we are clear about is that when we're speaking with someone with limb onset who does not have any bulbar symptoms, mainly, of course, speech and swallow, um, I will talk more initially about, we don't know what your trajectory is going to look like. We have a sense in terms of the typical symptom you will experience with speech and swallow, but because you have limb onset, you may not lose functional speech. You may have some small changes to your voice because of respiratory impairment or, some voice changes. We
Mhm,
may not be looking at full loss of speech. We don't know yet. I'm going to need to watch, take you through this. But
mhm,
still being proactive and saying, we want to slowly talk to you. We'll come in and make rapport with you. We'll ask you questions. I'll
mhm,
give you some information on expiratory muscle strength training that has,
mhm,
you don't have to worry. It's not about losing your speech. It's actually about improving your expiratory force. And
mhm,
that might help your airway clearance and um, being positive in that regard, and then also saying, I do say, especially to those with bulbar onset that are already having speech and swallowing
mhm,
issues, that
mhm,
yes, indeed, I will get people that say, am I going to lose my speech, like,
mhm,
and I have to say yes,
mhm,
yes, and then I say, but I
mhm,
want you to remember what communication is. Speech
mhm,
is a part of communication, but I'm
mhm,
using my hand right now to gesture. I use facial gestures. We use writing, we use texting, we use multiple ways to communicate. And I will make sure that you have a way to communicate
mhm,
throughout the changes in your disease. And so setting that stage early that, oh, I am
mhm,
going to have a way to communicate, or I am not going to choke on my tongue. That's a common question.
mhm.
Um, and then talking them through very slowly the changes in the symptoms is how we start. But Shameen, what do you think? Do you have other
Yeah,
ideas?
and I mean, we do all have conversations with patients telling them, like, we sometimes might bring up things that you might not be ready to discuss or you might not think you need, but we
Mhm,
do say, like, we try to be proactive because we like things to be in place before
mhm,
there's a crisis. And so I think over the years we've also kind of learned and adapted, and now, especially even for the instance like a feeding tube, like we sometimes just tell people early on, we're like, okay, you don't have to decide today. But
mhm,
the first question is like, is that something that you would consider having? Yes or no? That's all you have to think about. And
mhm,
then from that point, it's like, okay, if it's yes, then maybe we might ask you to have it a little bit earlier than you think you need it. But there's a reason behind it, right? Like we want people to get comfortable with it. Again, not in crisis.
mhm.
And again, there's always a wait time to get it done. So, we try to do that piece ahead of time and just kind of like, okay, like let's just break it up into small pieces and just see if the intervention, be it PEG, BiPAP, whatever, like, is it a yes or a no? And from there, we can kind of go forward to see, like, okay, where are we going to have our further discussions, right, in subsequent follow-ups?
I love that because you're balancing so beautifully um, where they're at in their illness and the reality, though, of their illness. And you're also giving them, you know, reassurances that are realistic and honest, but yet hopeful too, that, all is not lost, but let's not sugarcoat this. Uh,
Mhm.
and let's think of this in advance so that we can plan and you can be the best that you can be going forward. I love
And
it.
it, and I think Carrie and I have also just learned over time and with our own personal experiences is that this disease isn't just the patient, it's the caregiver, and we're very mindful of the extra work load
Mhm.
that these interventions could put on their caregivers, right? And so we're always trying to be very mindful of that and also prepare people of
Mhm.
what that would entail, right? And then also encouraging them to use other resources like home care, because that's always a barrier, right? No one wants people in their house. So like we're always trying to have those discussions, even though probably like, well, why is the dietitian and the SLB having those discussions? But again, it goes back to that we've built rapport with these patients. So sometimes they're comfortable having that discussion with us versus another team member just because we've spent time with them.
Mhm.
I mean, you both have already talked about the strategies that you're using to really sort of be proactive and empower patients. Do you ever feel like you meet resistance to being proactive, and how do you deal with that?
Most definitely. And I think that, again, we've worked together so long and, we come back to the office and debrief and think like, how can we do this better? Or why did that go that way? And we started to really look at what we were doing and how we were asking the questions and not so that be sure that we are not just delivering information, right? Like, well, here's why we need a feeding tube and here's what we need to do. So we started asking people, what do you want to know? And what kind of a learner are you? What kind of a person are you when you're under stress? Are you a person that needs to know? Like often the spouse is sitting there being like, "Yo, please tell me." And the person with ALS is going, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Please be quiet." So it's a little hard sometimes to balance the two in terms of them being so different, but we talk, we just say straight up, we want to get to know you. We want to understand how you tick so that we can provide the information for you the way you need to hear it. Although you have to please understand and trust us that we've been here for so long, we there is going to come a time where we need to be proactive. We don't want you to be in crisis, but we will be as mindful as we can about how you need to hear this information and we'll be respectful in that way.
Mhm. I'm clapping. I love that.
That
Yeah.
took time, like
Hmm.
because I think early on when you're an earlier clinician, either just green out of school or we both had been very experienced when we came here, but we were new to ALS and you get your little even your roadmap, which is amazing. But a newer clinician might get a piece of paper and go, okay, I have to talk about this. I'll
Mhm.
use mine. A voice amplifier. I got to tell them about voice banking. I got to tell them about feeding tube. And
Mhm.
the patient's like, wow, no. So we've really had to balance how much do we tell them today? What's really important for today? How do
Mhm.
we follow up with them so that we can give them time to process? But also, maybe I don't need to tell them about everything like right now.
It's a
Well,
learned skill.
appreciate is that you guys are very intentional about tuning in
Hmm.
the people in front of you,
Hmm.
that you're really doing this natural assessment of, you know, where they're at in their informational needs and their readiness and their style. And, you two have been working so long, your craft is so mature, and that you have a way of meeting people where they're at. And I agree with you that the newly graduated clinician would go about it quite differently.
Hmm.
So they could learn a lot from hanging out with people like you guys.
I mean, and related to that is, I'm curious if there are misconceptions about what you do and what you can offer. And I wonder if you could tell them, maybe I'll start with Shameen about your role. What's the biggest misconception and what you wish they knew about the things that you could offer?
That's a great question as a dietitian. I think the biggest misconception people have about dietitians is that, we plan menus. I've been a dietitian for 23 years plus. I've never planned a menu in my life, right? Um, and I think now there's just so much information available to people. Just like, on your phone, you can
Mhm.
scroll through like 30 different things. So my role I find is just to educate people on like what is nutritionally safe. I try, it's taken me many years, but I try not to, if people want to do a certain, like follow a certain diet, do some supplements, my only caveat is like, as long as it's safe, I will make sure you're not like missing out any deficiencies in other ways because at the end of the day, like I'm not going through what they're going through. And if there's any kind of hope, who knows? As long as it's not going to harm you, I will support you in that manner. And so that's one of the biggest things. And then specifically ALS and nutrition, like I just try to make sure that people understand, like, try to eat as many calories as you want. It's all good. You don't have to follow anything strict or anything like that. Like, enjoy the time with your family, eat all the good food. So
Mhm.
they usually do appreciate me. Hopefully, I always think they're like, oh, okay, you're not, because they always think I'm going to tell them this is what you can eat, this is what you can't eat. And I come in going, oh, yeah, ice cream, please have it for breakfast. It's all good for you, right?
I
So,
observe this, and that's what I thought you were going to say too, is just like, oh yeah, they come, people literally have their back up a little bit when they see that the dietitian is coming and they think she's going to tell them what they're doing wrong and that they have to eat this and that. She's just sitting there going, chips? Great. Ice cream? Yeah. And
yeah,
they slowly start to go, oh, I love you.
You just need to help them how to get it down.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and I mean, we've been able to, again, because we did our little experimentations with like diet modification. So we're always like, you like pizza? We can figure that out for you. Like, don't worry, we got a video to show you how to do it, right?
Oh
So,
yeah, that's one of the things you guys made videos of how to modify all the food in on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
It's on a YouTube, which is super cool.
Well, yeah. Oh, I guess it is, isn't it now, Shamim? But yeah.
yes, for
Carrie, how
everyone to
about you?
see.
What are misconceptions that people have about what a
I,
speech language pathologist does? And
I think, yeah, I think there's two things. One is that for any of my colleagues, they tend to think that I only do dysphagia or swallowing,
Mhm.
because so many SLPs in the inpatient world, are so busy with dysphagia that's their role. Um,
dysphagia is, just remind me,
the
is
swallow, so impaired swallowing. So, or focusing on swallowing. So I remember when Shamim and I first started partnering, and you came from the inpatient world, Shamim, and uh, I remember when I would start pulling out all my communication tools. So showing, well, first of all, not just okay, here's a letter board. That's another pet peeve I have of misconception of, oh, just give them a letter board. I'm like, no, we all communicate differently and for different reasons. And there's all, we may have physical status differences that need to be addressed in terms of how we use that communication tool, da 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 da. And so when I start my little show and tell of all the different tools that I have to help a person communicate, whether that be an eye gazing or eye pointing sheet or a text to speech app or all kinds of things. Shamim one day looks at me and she was like, I didn't even know you did this. Like, your job is so cool, you should show all of our colleagues. And so that is a big misconception, is that I just do swallow. So that's one thing for sure. And then
Meal,
when it comes to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
this is a meal planning and swallowing.
Yeah.
That's what they think you do. Yeah.
And then when it comes to patients often only think about like a speech therapist with a little kid. Like, there's a child that has a speech impediment, and that must be what you do. Yeah.
Mhm.
mm, mhm. I mean, we've been, I know you're familiar with, the waiting room revolution, our podcast and our real mission, which is to empower patients and families with information and healthcare providers, trying to
Hmm.
activate them and get them to hope for the best, but also plan for the rest. And maybe, I mean, I can hear it in what you're talking about, the ways that you're exemplifying some of our keys, but what are your reactions to some, that whole movement and some of the tools and resources we've produced? Does that seem to fit well with your approach to what you're doing with ALS patients?
Oh, 100%. We were reviewing it a little bit before, and we were like, okay, yeah, we do this, we do that. We just don't word it as nicely as you guys do, right? We really appreciate the wording that you guys have with your steps, and so we really do try to like, know patient style. We try to zoom out. We really try to encompass a lot of those key elements that you guys have identified, and we were saying like, oh, I wish. We could kind of have that as sort of like an intro package for patients, right? As like, okay, here's a little the roadmap, even just having that to give to patients at the beginning, because I think that would be really helpful. And even for clinicians to just be like, okay, like, because I think we all kind of do it. It's just never we just don't realize like it's not labeled. But then you're like, oh yeah, like we just try to do that, or like I could do more of this, right?
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, most definitely. And I think that your tagline of hope for the best, plan for the rest could really, we could be using that more. And I think that that would be helpful to us to add to, again, our toolkit to
Mhm.
be able to say, well, like, let's say we're talking about speech. Well, let's hope for the best.
Mhm.
But let's plan for the rest. Let's plan to, download your app to your phone early and let's get used to it, which is what I'm doing already, but adding that little bit of wording ahead of time to get that in their minds that, right, I'm hoping for the best, but I'm just planning for the rest. Or same thing goes with diet mods, right?
Hmm.
Oh, that's the cool way of saying diet
Oh,
modifications.
diet mods.
Yeah, you know what? So Sienna and I were just talking about this before you guys came on, but
Hmm.
we were talking about how narrating what we do is sometimes quite helpful for patients and families to follow our train of thought. So
Mm.
um, I mean, you could be doing what you're doing, but when you
Hmm.
actually say, well, why don't we hope for the best and plan for the rest? Then we can da 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 da. But having said it out loud, they
Yeah,
understand the framework in which you are operating and why you're suggesting what you're doing and follow you along better. It's funny,
I
we were
like
just
that.
talking about this actually. Um, so yeah, walking two roads is quite helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, our hope is that we can intervene early, like you said. If people meet you early, there's the opportunity for the most benefit. But there are times, and I guess there's a lot of mystique and mystery about the end of life or in the last chapter, the last, late stage of an illness. And I'm curious to hear from both of you. There's a lot of anxiety around
Hmm.
communication and around
Hmm.
nutrition at
Hmm.
end of life. Not just the last weeks and days, but the last months. And I'm curious for ALS and in your roles, like what do you wish people knew about that last chapter and, in your respective roles?
I think like from a swallow perspective, like we always get that like when people either decide to have a feeding tube or not, because they'll ask like, well, what happens if we decide not to go the feeding tube route? So we try to have that frank conversation of like, okay, well, if that's the route you're going to go, then our job here is just to help with like make more diet modifications. And then we do have that difficult discussion of like there may come a point where it is then now just eating for comfort, right? And it's not about making sure they get in enough calories or anything like that. And then we kind of go that symptom management route, right? Of like, okay, if you're having difficulty with fluid intake, like, maybe we consider crisis and explaining what that is for patients and just really kind of talking to family members, especially. I think that it's okay that
Hmm.
you're not giving them a full meal, but even just a couple of bites, like
Hmm.
that's okay, right? And as people are progressing and coming towards the end, like it's okay. Like I think that just letting them know that this is just natural part of their process and their disease. And I mean, it's a tough discussion to have for sure.
But
But
I
we
see
try.
relief,
Yeah.
like when we do, especially you, Shamim, when you're talking about all of that, that the family just wants to do the very best and they're scared and they're not sure what's next. And so when you do present it like that, Shamim, I can see just a visual like, oh, okay, thank you. Like, thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. Mm.
And usually behind that, the the person with ALS at that point isn't as hungry
No,
Mm-hmm.
as they
exactly.
were
Mm-hmm.
in the past. And I think that's what families worry most about, is that
Mhm.
this person is feeling so hungry, yet they
Yeah,
can't get in what they need to satisfy their hunger,
Yeah.
right,
or that they're starving to death
Yeah.
is another.
I think
right.
for a lot of us, like food is and giving food, preparing food, like that's our love language. And
Mm.
so when you can't do that for a patient, that just feels like, okay, like what what's happening? Like what do I do now? Right. So it's very difficult, but hopefully they feel comfortable with us to have that discussion, right?
Mhm.
It's tricky to convey the whole concept of your loved one is dying from the
Mm-hmm.
ALS, not dying from the lack of nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
calories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So this has a natural process that's happening, and calories are not the antidote.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So, but I agree with you, because I'm in that hot seat as well, often in people's homes, and I do
Mhm.
find it very relieving for families and patients. Patients
Mhm.
are like, if they can speak, like, thank you for telling them that,
Mhm.
because I've been feeling so much stress trying to, you know, be the best swallower possible,
Yeah.
or,
Mhm. Yeah.
to try to get in what they're trying to give me, but it's causing me a lot of stress and a lot of
Mhm.
fear and a
Mhm.
lot of anxiety. So the
Yeah.
patient will thank you, and
Yeah.
the family will say, what, they're not, it's a difficult conversation, like you said, but they're often relieved that they can refocus on some other way to show their love, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that there's not this pressure, and they're failing their loved one by not getting enough into them.
Mhm.
So information is so powerful and can course correct the group of them from feeling so much suffering around this
Mhm.
topic, to
Mhm.
understanding how normal it is.
That's right.
How
And
about
we,
communication and speech?
oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Carrie. Yes.
yes. And okay. And for sure, when it's closer to end of life and the person may be quite fatigued. They may not have the energy to, even for if they were using a low tech, I call it, so not even computer at that point, but maybe a little transparent sheet that they can see through and they can use their eyes to point.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes that's really helpful, but sometimes it's not because they're fatigued. I let them know early on, and then also I reiterate it through the various stages that as your needs change, whether that be physically or fatigue wise, um, I will be there to change the method for you, where you're not going to just have one method to communicate. And so that makes them feel better. So I will tell them, even at end of life, if you're really tired and you don't have a lot of energy, then we're going to keep it to yes, no questions. And we're going to have a sheet for your caregivers that we can just run through and ask if it's something else. And we'll put more of the onus on the caregiver. But there will be a way for you to communicate, and that's always relieving for people to know that, and that it changes over time.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
The method changes.
Mhm.
Do you guys have examples of stories of where when they were proactive and empowered and maybe implemented when you got involved early, that the experience was markedly better, say, than maybe if for patients where you arrive on the scene late? It's helpful to hear
Hmm.
sort of a story that illustrates this because I think, sometimes we get into the abstract, but listeners might sort of not really appreciate that there really is, opportunities for major changes in how patient and family will experience an illness.
Well, Shamim, I'm thinking about a really early educational experience for us both about someone who needed a peg tube, so a feeding tube. And you'll catch on in a second.
I know. I was like, oh no, I don't know what you're
You're like,
talking
oh
about.
no, oh no, abort. No, where this gentleman came, it was when we weren't even in this clinic a long time ago. And he came and needed a feeding tube. And we could just see the incredible fright on his face. And this was a guy, so he only had speech and swallow issues. So he was able to walk, he was able to use his hands, he was still like working, and he was working out in the field, like in outdoors. And he came in and we said we were to the point of like, like we've tried some diet modifications and it's probably be a good time for you to have a feeding tube. And we had already talked to him about it.
Mm.
But then when the day came where he had to decide, he was petrified. And I was a little confused because I thought, oh, like we've already talked about this, and I'm just wondering why he looks so petrified. So it turned out this is what we do. We just call it. We're like, well, you look really scared. Tell me what's going on in your mind right now. And then he was able to say, I've never been in the hospital before. I am freaking out. I need to know more about the procedure. And so we started to realize, right, there's the whole aspect of, well, okay, I made the decision about a feeding tube and all that and how I'm going to care for it and use it. But what about just that hospital stay and how that's going to look when he's never been in one in his life? And so we worked on that. So then he went ahead. Do you know who I'm talking about now?
Yep, I do
Okay.
now.
So then you can carry on. So then he went ahead and got it done. And Shameem, take it over. What did he?
and and it was fantastic. Like he came back to us and he was like, thank you so much for telling me to have that intervention done when I did. Like the hospital stay was fine for him, and like I think he was calling us
He was.
from a ferry on the way to Victoria. Like, and he was tube feeding at the time, so we were like, oh, look at that. So the good thing is from that one patient, we now make a point when we talk about a feeding tube, we kind of talk about the whole aspect of like, okay, well, if this is what you're going to do, like this is what it entails, including the hospital stay. You have to stay like X amount of days, perhaps. Don't worry,
Mhm.
there's all the teachings going to be happening. We're going to follow you afterwards. So just giving people reassurance that, they're not just going to have this intervention done and they'll just be out there by themselves and no one's checking in on them. And I think the other thing is also sometimes people, like you were saying earlier, like, you're even before where the swallow has gotten difficult and there's a little bit of reluctance to the feeding tube. And I think one thing we have learned over the years is also to remind people that, if you get a feeding tube, it doesn't mean you stop eating. Like you can still enjoy food. It's just the feeding tube is there to help supplement what you can't. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, maybe fluid is the only thing you're really struggling with swallow wise. So just use the feeding tube for that, but you still get to eat all your meals. Or maybe it's just medication that's really difficult. So you got the feeding tube to help with that, but you still get to eat. And sometimes that also just like is this instant relief. And then there's that whole pressure. Like sometimes we have patients who are taking like an hour plus to finish a meal and just super exhausted. And then they don't have time to spend with their family. So we're always like, if you go this route and it's something that you want to do, this relieves some of that pressure. So then you can spend time doing the things that are much more meaningful than trying to finish this plate of food that's taking you an hour. And then there's no enjoyment. Like that always breaks my heart when people say like, I don't enjoy eating anymore because I love eating and I love everything about eating. So I'm just like, oh, if there's some way I can help you get back that joy, like, maybe this is something to consider.
Now that's another version of hope for the best, plan for the rest, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's hope that you can swallow the things you like for as long as possible, but
Mm-hmm.
just in case, or
Mm-hmm.
when the time comes that, you are hungrier, more hungry than you can get stuff
Mm-hmm.
in, then
Mm-hmm.
it's your reassurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people who are listening would also want to know that it is also okay for anyone with ALS at any stage that they can decide that they don't want to go for a feeding tube,
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
100%. Yep.
Absolutely.
that we would all support them through that as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And we're, again, it comes back to what does that person value?
Mhm.
What do they want to see out of their life, their socialization, their communication, their eating and eating with people, or like do those things matter to you? Or even I'm really involved right now in AI or artificial intelligence voice cloning because this has been a
Mhm.
pretty big topic lately. And
Ah,
I have, again, it's such an exciting thing that we can have people's voices literally cloned and use in devices. So it's like so exciting that I can give them some hope back from their vocal identity. However, there are people that still say, I don't care. I don't want that. Like, I don't even care. So good. Okay, great. And I have to find out where that person is and meet them where they are and then go on that journey with them. Not my journey, their journey, right?
Yeah.
I had a, I was visiting a woman. She had ALS and she had one of these voice um, apparatuses, let's just
Mm-hmm.
say. I don't know what it was called. she got such a kick of having a different voice every time she
Right.
answered the question. She was either an Australian man or like, yeah, she loved that, her voice identity could change over.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think when I think about the pain points for people in your departments, like the
Mhm.
patients and families, yeah, I think about the fact some of the same fears that you guys are talking about, which is, not being able to communicate, um, choking,
Mhm.
um, what else?
Hydration, right? Starving to death.
Starvation.
Starving to death. Yeah.
I think for us, a lot of times we also hear from people like, because eating and dining is such a social aspect with friends. And so if
Mhm.
they start to have dysphagia, they kind of start to
I'm
stop
isolated.
that, right? Because they
Yeah.
don't want to be choking in front of their friends. So we always try to, again, give them a little bit of hope of like, okay, like you can still socialize, but maybe you have your bigger meal before you go out. And then when you're in the restaurant, try to choose something that you will be able to manage, like be it like a little thicker soup, or maybe it's just dessert like a cheesecake. You can handle the filling, right? But you're still able to socialize, but you can do it in a much safer manner and a more comfortable manner for them. So we do try, we've been trying to do that
Yeah.
really well.
And I see families who, say, well, we're not eating because if they can't eat,
Yes.
we feel so guilty about eating. And so that's, you know, I'm sure you also remind people that their loved one wants you to be well
Yes.
and um, affirm that they feel guilty about it, but that, you know, they're not as hungry as you are. And
Mhm.
the enjoyment of watching people eat and a satisfying whatever and enjoy their meal is still brings people quality of life, even if they can't eat.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's a huge topic actually, and much of, I'm thinking that if you had to invite one other team member alongside you two, it's very OT what you guys do also, like
Mhm.
occupational therapy. There are
Mhm.
some common threads through what you're talking about. You know, just walking alongside the changes and helping people to adapt to be the best that they can be
That's
with
right.
their nutrition, their quality of life, their communication. It's very OT.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I'm surprised you didn't share that before you became an MD, you trained a dietitian, right? Didn't
I know,
you?
but I was worried that maybe Shameem would start quizzing me, like
Oh,
how many calories
oh,
one
No.
carbohydrate have versus a protein.
See, that's a new trim dietitian misconception, right?
When you said what they think dietitians are, I'm thinking, oh yeah, they used to say, oh, dietaries here to plan
yes,
meals for you.
dietary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Need to plan a menu. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I don't do
No,
that.
no.
I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, I'm like, no.
I'm just listening,
But wait,
reflecting because
and can I just say one more thing about a
yeah,
diet
of
now that you
course.
brought that up? I really appreciate both of you. Shamim, I really appreciate how you help people to understand that the amount of food will be tapered over time. Because I do find in the field of dietetics, and reflecting back on my training as a dietitian, oh my gosh, like 30 years ago, and I never really worked as one, so just keep that in mind. There was really no training that involved us understanding how to walk alongside someone
Mhm.
nutritionally who is expected to decline
Mhm.
and
Yes.
die. As a dietitian, you were boosting calories and pushing calories and calculating calories
Mhm.
for recovery and repair and, activity. And one of the stresses that I come across often in people's homes is, and with all due respect, the dietitian has told us that we need to get 4 cans of this in a day,
Mm. Yeah.
6 cans a day, and
Mhm.
da 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 da. Da. Any comment about that, Shamim? Like, what about the training of dietitians? Did you have it in your training, or is this something you just learn on the fly?
I think it's because I've worked in the ALS clinic for like
Yeah.
19 plus years, right? And
Yeah.
I also work like outpatient neurology, so I don't just see ALS patients. I see a lot of neurodegenerative conditions, and it's very different, right? It's not they're not your typical chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease. And so it's a different approach, I think, with patients that you have to take, and you do have to look globally,
Mhm.
um, which again, like you said, is lacking on, I think, in many areas, in a
Mm-hmm.
lot
Yes,
of health professions, right? Like we just
correct.
are
It makes
so focused on inpatient care, right? And no shade to inpatients. That's a really hard job. But I always tell people, like, not all of us, most of us hopefully will never have a hospital stay. Like that's not normal to have a hospital stay. And the hospital is a real bubble. It's not real life. But we
yeah,
don't focus on like what we do on a day to day. And that I think the training, I really would wish that we did focus more on that, right? But it's just, I don't know, I guess it's just the way the system is set up, right? There's always a push for like more beds, which I get. I get all of that. I just feel like the rest of us don't get as much attention. And I think if our true goal is like preventative medicine, that's where we should be focusing our attention. Sorry, that's my soapbox.
well, for the next prime minister. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Like
I mean, I
I have
was gonna
I
say
have
something.
Carrie's vote.
Yeah, Gary. I was just gonna on the same vein. I was saying I really appreciate talking to both of you because in all of your answers, actually, you've not only demonstrated, I'm listening it with the lens of the seven keys, but
Mm-hmm.
actually, Sammy and I often talk about how different disciplines, it's every interprofessional uh, clinician's role to be able to, in their own scope of practice, to be able to help people understand where they're at and where they're going, and to help them understand the big picture of their illness, but
Mm-hmm.
specific to their role. And in all of your answers, really, you've been demonstrating how you talk about where they're at, but also what the future will look like and how it might progress, but not, sort of pretending that we're just focused on the day and we're here to help you
Mm-hmm.
be as well as you can, which is true, but that there are changes to be expected. And I think it just gives me hope because, we obviously represent the roles that we do, and I'm just a researcher. I don't have a clinical role, but we
yes.
have always said that it there is a way for everyone to be able to do this, to be
Mhm.
able to share or at least coach others, that they can ask about what changes are realistic and what can I do to prepare for that. And you
Mm-hmm.
guys are you guys are showing clinicians how to do it, but also giving permission for patients to ask. So I think it's really
You're
awesome.
so right, Sian. Like these two in their clinic, I don't know anyone else in the clinic. What amazing role models you are.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
it's not, it is, okay, fine, speech language pathology and dietitian, really important roles, super cool, super interesting, super important. But just as important is this vibe that you guys have of balancing all the things we've talked about, where you're walking these fine lines of hope and planning and the present and the future and what is now and what will be. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that is the number one reason Cian and I have created this content and this social movement is because, most people don't stumble across people like you guys, and it's more common that clinicians struggle with giving themselves permission to walk these two roads. So
Mm-hmm.
I really think that you guys probably do more in your clinic than you realize. It's not just the roles that you have, it's the way you guys work in your roles
Mm-hmm.
that is
And
probably so inspiring. The role modeling that you guys are doing naturally.
yeah, and helping people see the big picture, because if their clinicians are calling it and giving permission to talk about, and that there's hope, just because it's progressing and changing doesn't mean there's not things to hope for. That's in every answer you've
And
had.
that
So
there can't be humor and that there can't be light moments and,
Yeah.
dark humor and
Yep.
all of these things can be integrated into a situation that no one wants to be in, but find themselves in, and can have people like you two, with your beautiful smiles, and just the air about you is so engaging. And that's the other thing I think I'm really impressed about is how the power gap between you two almighty, healthcare providers and the patients and families that you work alongside with, that
Oh,
power gap in the way that you two work and speak. with your patients is so uh, bridged. It's not a big power gap. You guys are real. You approach, even in the way that you went into your kitchen and tried all these crazy things, and you're just real people doing really important jobs for really scared patients and families.
Mm-hmm. Thank
Thank
you.
you
My
very much.
goodness.
Oh no.
I think again, back from one of the first things I said, I think we're very blessed. I am so thankful to have Shamim as my
Ditto.
partner in crime because we've developed such an amazing relationship, and that speaks volumes, I think, just in terms of honestly, there's hardly a time that we can't read each other's minds. She
Mhm.
got me here on that, or we figured each other out on this, the person I was talking about. And there's only one time when you came back from mat leave where you're a little like, hello.
Oh yeah. I think it was my first day back and I
She
was like,
couldn't follow me.
I just looked at her like, I don't know what you want me to say here. I am not following what's going on. Patient laughed, so that was good.
And that's the thing. That's exactly what we do. We're just who we are. And I guess that's a message to others is that you can't force these things. You can absolutely, learn these 7 keys, ask the questions. I love how you guys have on your handouts, like ask yourself this on
Mhm.
your 7 keys. What do you want people to know about you? What do you value most? Like those are good prompts. And even as clinicians, okay, I do want to go in there and just be myself. I don't need to know everything. That's another biggie. I don't need
Mhm.
to go in there and be all stressed out and know everything. I'm just going to go in and I'm going to be me. And I'm
Mhm.
going to say to that person, "Oh, you look scared. Did something I say offend you or did that like whatever. Like just be real
Mhm.
and let the conversation go?"
You
No
tuned in?
scripts. Yeah.
Mm.
And just to piggyback, I think again, like working with Carrie has been fantastic, but we've also been very fortunate with the clinic that we have. Like our physicians and our nurses and the social worker and the physiatrist, the respirologist, like they've all been, we just work with a really amazing team and we always come back from like conferences going like, oh man, we got it made around here. Like we are very, very fortunate with the people that we've had opportunities to work with and they've really kind of given us freedom to
Hmm.
be who we are and like they kind of go along with our crazy ideas and it's just been really great for that.
I want to work in your clinic.
Oh, please
Yeah.
come join us.
I
Come and
love
see
that.
us.
Yeah.
It's been amazing to talk to you. I'd love to end the interview with, our book, Hope for the Best, Plan for the Rest, and the 7 Keys workbook is really, bringing hope for people. So maybe I can ask, what are you guys hopeful for? What gives you hope, and what are you hopeful for looking forward?
Ooh, it's a tough question. Well, I think anyone who works in ALS, I mean, we hope one day there'll be a cure for sure. And there's been lots of advancements, which is really actually quite nice to see. Like when you've worked in the clinic for 19 years and you remember where you were when you first started and what was available to patients and what's available now, like that's really inspiring and hopeful. I just hope like, eventually Carrie and I won't be working in the clinic, but hopefully our legacy will carry on and
Yeah.
the work that we were able to do here inspires other people to continue doing that in other manners.
Mm.
Oh,
I think
wow.
you guys
You
should
really
teach
nailed that one.
Yeah.
in your roles for other diseases because I know we've talked a lot about ALS, but there's got to be overlap with what you're talking about to
Mhm.
other other clinics. Anyway,
Yep.
go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was so glad. I mean, I really reiterate what Shamim said, and especially, just hoping for our legacy. I think like both of us are maybe nearer to the retiring age than we once were. And I think about that. Like, what do I want to leave? And I enjoy teaching, helping, mentoring, encouraging, and I would really love that opportunity to teach other SLPs or other team members, what we've learned and how we've worked. And not because of who we are, but because we were so blessed to be able to have this team and then our partnership,
Mm.
that I just want that for others. And my other hope would be that we have more multidisciplinary clinics around Canada that are very cohesive and collaborative, where we work all together. We're all together in one clinic when we see people. We're not like dispersed across buildings and things, and we can communicate together. We can be on the fly. Ooh, that person needs to talk about PEG. Go in there, and
Mm.
I hope that for others as well.
I thought your hope was going to be about AI.
Oh, well, that's not even a hope, that's a reality.
Oh, that's a reality. That's true.
It's
Well, I
amazing.
actually have a hope.
Yes.
I hope that your organization does not allow you both to retire at the same time.
Oh,
No, we have to retire at the same time. I can't work without her.
Oh,
Like
but the
I
two
keep
new
tell
ones
I keep
coming
telling her, like,
in.
no.
No, 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 but you have to overlap so that someone's there to sort of train
oof,
this one.
Oh, I don't
oof.
know.
We
I
are
know.
we are really working on thinking of ways to do education and spreading this, the essence of what all of that we're talking about, but we'll follow up because it's for all disciplines.
It
This
is.
skill is something people learn, or if they're lucky enough to learn it and do it well, but it really should be the aspiration for all healthcare providers, I think. Because if
Mhm.
we all embodied that vibe, I think, patients and families would benefit not just in ALS, of course. But
Absolutely.
Carrie, Shameem, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
We
Thanks for
loved it.
having us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks for listening. Our workbook, Applying the 7 Keys for Navigating a Life-Changing Diagnosis, is available now at all online bookstores. Visit our website for more details and to access our free resources, event listings, and learn all about our movement. The best way to keep up with us and our work is to join our newsletter list, or better yet, become an ambassador. This episode was produced by Maggie Sivak, myself, Kayla McMillan, Shilpa Jyothi Kumar, Bethany Bachanfuso, and Kathleen Bartlett. Our theme music is Maypole by Ketsa.